I think like consider we only have 5 engineers, we're supporting like 2 million users. I think the number is quite good.
Hey team, Sid here, and this is DevOps Deployed, the show where we take a look at DevOps and cloud infrastructure in the wild. Each week, I interview industry experts about their experience building software systems and the teams behind them. Today, I'm joined by Wei Li and José Dominguez. Wei is the co-founder and CTO of Thunkable, a drag-and-drop programming tool that allows anyone to build cloud-native mobile apps. Wei studied computer science and machine learning at MIT, where he worked on a project called App Inventor, which is the precursor to Thunkable. José is a full-stack software engineer with over 15 years of experience building software systems for organizations around the world. He also worked on App Inventor at MIT as a visiting scientist, and now works on the platform that allows Thunkable to be used by millions of people around the world. Rumor has it that Wei and José first bonded at MIT over a love of getting lunch and boba together in the Cambridge area. Wei and José, welcome to the show.
Hey Sid, thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
And so I'd like to start each of these interviews with a similar question, just to get us all on the same page. José, what is your definition of DevOps?
I don't think we have a definition as such. So we're such a small company that for us, DevOps is just pretty much everything. From provisioning to continuous integration, running automated tests, of course, deployment. But it's also about architectural decisions. So certain services might be more of an event-driven nature. It's probably better to front them with a queue or something like that. We do have certain external constraints. For instance, we build iOS artifacts. If you build an iOS app, what's the first step you need? You need to buy a Mac. So our infrastructure is sort of a hybrid thing because we cannot do everything on GCP, which is the provider that we use, but we also have to provision Mac machines, that sort of thing. So, and we also relied quite a bit on external services like Mongo Atlas or hosted Redis, that sort of thing. So it is, for us, really, it's just everything.
Whatever it takes to get it done, right?
Yeah, exactly. We don't have an engineering team and an operations team, or no, it's just go and do it.
José does most of the stuff, so he's our hero of the week.
José's the one-man DevOps band?
No, not really. I mean, most of the stuff it was already there when I arrived. So yeah, it's Wei does quite a lot as well. So no, not just me.
So before we dive in on some more specifics about what that looks like at Thunkable, could you give a brief description of what Thunkable is?
In a nutshell, Thunkable is the local, no-code mobile app builders. So whenever you log in thunkable.com, so you see a online IDE. You can drag and drop UI element, and we also enable you to preview your screen. So as you drag and drop, you will see the app in front of you, like interactive. You can play around with it. So in terms of like the behavior, piece up block together. For example, like whenever you press a button, it will trigger something. For example, like change the background color. You can also do that in our platform using the blocks. So, and also like this kind of stuff was based from our research at MIT, like MIT App Inventor, or even earlier called MIT Scratch. So if you're familiar with all this stuff.
It really empowers people who might not otherwise be able to build a mobile application to do so. Do you have any favorite examples of apps that people have built on the Thunkable platform that you could share?
We're actually working on a number of a bit more serious or business-like use cases at the moment, which will be live on the website next week, I believe. It's going to be the first one out. But we do have a number of favorites. So for instance, we have a user in Yemen that wrote an app for installation and maintenance of solar panels. So that app was very popular. It made it to Fast Company and stuff like that. It made the rounds through social media. We also have a user that built this app called Veggie Alternatives, which is basically a directory of vegan and vegetarian resources. It's an app that has over 30,000 downloads, which for nowadays, the way that stores work, one individual working on a rather unconventional tool like ours to have over 30,000 downloads is quite significant. So we really like this sort of examples.
What did the initial product look like? I know it was built out of this App Inventor project at MIT, but what kind of features were embedded in that first iteration? How big was the team? Was it just you? Were there others building this thing? What did that look like?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. I think first of all, I want to give a huge credit to the MIT App Inventor team. So basically, our initial code base was basically a clone of the MIT App Inventor open source projects. So I think at the beginning, as like we hear from our user at that time, is they want to have like the nice theme. They want to be able to like make their app look nicer. They want to able to add the custom font. So I think the first initial prototype was basically we took clone of projects, and then we quickly able and add all this like different things people were actually looking for it. So I think that's the really initial part that we probably spent like 2 weeks on it and do a customization on it. I think at that time it's only me and my co-founder Arun. He's the CEO. Quickly after that, I think we get into like Y Combinator is an incubator in the Bay Area. For the first like 3 or 4 months, it's only like 2 of us working on it. Yeah.
And Jose mentioned that GCP is your major cloud provider. Was that the case back then as well? Were you hosting on GCP?
At the early beginning, it's like we host everything on GCP. I think there's a specific early part of it. It's called a App Engine, which is like you can just deploy your code and then they were handling like the scaling up, the database, and all the stuff. Right now, it's like things are really different.
And then in terms of the tech stack of the platform itself, what languages were you using? What tools helped you build and deploy that?
At the beginning, it's entirely like the Java framework. Our backend is Java. Our frontend is called the Google Web Toolkit and JavaScript for block, whatever the block we're using. And also we are using like something called the scheme. It's basically whenever like you're piecing up stuff together, you will see it as a mobile app on your phone immediately. It's a real time. So that's really cool at that time. Yeah.
And it sounds like you're leveraging much of the tooling that App Engine provides to handle things like scaling. I believe they make deployments pretty easily. Did you have CI/CD set up, or what did that look like?
I think we just like push a new version and then you handle it. I think it's pretty sweet at that time. Like when we don't have that much user, we don't have that much customization, when we don't need to do a lot of analytics, that's really sweet. Yeah.
And then are there any particular considerations around security, right? So users are building their own custom applications. Most of that is getting executed client side, either in the web preview or on the mobile phone. But are they running any arbitrary code on your servers?
Not as such. So we don't allow arbitrary code. So we allow for a lot of flexibility, but everything that gets executed, we transpile it from our own blocks. So people have a lot of flexibility, but they are still restricted to what we allow them to do. There is one instance we opened a little bit more on the web view. We have a component that is a web view, and we have one block that you can exchange messages from your own JavaScript to the web view, but it is still executed within the web view, so it's sandboxed. And we do, we sanitize inputs and all that kind of stuff. So it's not like other app builders out there. They just have this JavaScript code and they allow you to paste this chunk of code. We do not do that.
You had this great foundation from the App Inventor code base. You're able to take that and continue to build on it at Thunkable. Users start using the product. You start needing to hire additional team members. Are there any bottlenecks in that growth process that stand out that were challenging as you started to scale up?
I think one of the challenging we are seeing at that time at the early beginning is like our back end can easily scale. There's another piece of our infrastructure which is responsible for like, if I send a JSON file to you, you build me like whatever like the end product is like the APK file for Android, the IPA for iOS, which enable you install on the phone. So naturally, that part is like, it's not really scalable, right? We need to figure out like how many machines we need, and we need to set up the config the box. I think at some point we're just getting tired of it. I think that's the time like we first just go to like Kubernetes, and also we turn on like auto scaling at that part. And it's like whenever like we need to like deploy the build server, we don't need to go to individual box and then put the update. We can just like send out one command and it will config all the box for us.
Initially, was that build farm happening within the App Engine app, or was that a separate thing?
It's a separate thing, yeah.
And what did the configuration look like before you had Kubernetes?
It's a Linux box. It's basically running on a Java environment. At that time, at the beginning, we only have like hundreds of users. But after we graduate from the Y Combinator batch, we have like thousands of users. That's at the time we need to really think about like scaling this like the build farm part. Yeah.
So did you have one or a few of those Linux boxes, and then when a user would kick off a build, it would enter a queue somewhere, or is that what it looked like?
I think at the beginning we only have like 3 boxes.
Okay.
I think at the end of the day is like we have like 10 of them running on parallel. I think it's like eventually like we want to just put it on auto scale whenever it's like busy. All the busy we just spin it up like in no time. Yeah.
That sort of talks to bottlenecks on the technical side. How many engineers do you currently have on the team? And did you encounter any bottlenecks on the team side or the process side?
At the beginning, it's only me and my co-founder. The joys of being in the area is like you see so many people, but the tough part is like it's so competitive to hire anybody. I think the joy of us is like we can pull resources from the MIT all day, like the great friend like José, so we can sort of work on together. I think the bottleneck at the beginning is like for us is like as a young startup, like it's really difficult to hire engineer. But fortunately, like I think like we get some great people from the MIT App Inventor all day, and also through like the collaboration with Google, we also have some people there, which is really nice for us at the early day. Yeah.
How big is the current engineering team?
Oh, including me is 5 people, and also we have like one part-time is helping us with some of the like on-demand infrastructure issues.
And we also have one data analyst and one UX person. So yeah, overall it's 7. And the company is about 14 of us at the moment.
It's really impressive what you all have built and how many users are using this platform consistently with such a small team.
Yeah, I think over the years we accumulated like more than 2 million users, 5 million projects have been done. I think like consider we only have 5 engineering, we're supporting like 2 million users. I think the number is quite good.
That's very impressive. Are there any interesting PagerDuty stories or times when the app platform went down or were misbehaving that you can share with us?
I'm not sure if interesting is the right word to describe it. I'm kind of a mixed feeling. So I can tell you a little bit interesting story which we have been encountered. I think it's also related to like the build farm park. So I think it's about one night, about like 1 a.m. PST, right? We just get a pingdom call basically saying like, your server is not responsive, especially your build farm is like all busy, right? We just like could not figure it out that part, and then we look at our like backend build farm like number. There were like 15 machine running, and then like we were confused, what's going on? So it turns out that there were a class of like 50 people, right? Basically teaching introduction to app building using our platform. And then at the end of the course, like at the end of the class, like 45 minutes later, the instructor basically say, hey, you guys is like, finish building an app. Click submit and build it. And then it just flooded our build farm. It's like, oh, interesting. At that time, we don't have any like tracking to see where the traffic are coming from. We thought we get attacked by like all these like bot, but it turns out that like it was a really lovely story that like class is using us and it's flooded. And then because we realize is like, not sure if, like, how much we tell about it. Our users coming from like all around the world. So basically it's like we don't know when are they coming and what are they doing with our platform. And then like since then like we like keep really our eye on our build farm and then like figured out like what's the right infrastructure. Eventually like I did the first version of like the queuing of the build, and then Jose like improve on it, and it's really much more robust than like 2 years ago.
What is triggering that pingdom alert? Is it monitoring CPU and memory on those boxes?
Majority is the CPU and memory usage, yeah.
And so 1 a.m. it pings you. How long is that process before you figure out what's going on? Or what does the triage look like to try and get things back up and running?
I think at that time it was me and another engineer, and then was like, I just went back to sleep at midnight, and then like, what's going on? And then my co-founder was like calling me, is like, hey, what's going on? There's something wrong. I'm still not sleeping. We just quickly like look over our load. basically is like one of the thing like at the beginning since Thunkable started, we have good analytic in place. So basically we look at our Amplitude dashboard, we see like all these users are coming from. It turns out they're coming from like the same location. We quickly know this is not a bot. We just went in like Kubernetes and manually increase how many like build farm we have. I think we double our build, like the number of build server. Just one lesson learned here. There was a gap between like the moment like they detected it's busy and how fast it can like spin it up machine, right? So I think one thing we learned is we love Kubernetes, but it's not responding as fast as we want it. Especially like when you download like all the dependency, sometimes it could be really slow, even though you try to catch it. But sometimes it's like they try to refresh it, but that's just like we figured out there's like really a gap in between, and then we need to put the queue in place, like the process in sequence. Yeah.
We'll dive in a little bit more on the current architecture in a bit and how you're using Kubernetes. But I think there was a big milestone for Thunkable in 2018 with the release of Thunkable X. Can you talk about what that was in terms of the migration from what you had before to this new Thunkable X platform?
Before I get into it, I want to give a little bit background. Our old platform is for Android only, right? So I think we are on a mission. We want to like make the upbuilding experience easier, right? We want people to truly like using like no code, low code too, right? We cannot like do it without iOS. So we quickly realized it's like we want to build like the iOS part. So we just like for when we started, I think it's like the world is really different. It's like we're talking about React Native and JavaScript and all the stuff. At that time, it's just like, what if you write an app in JavaScript, right? React Native at that time is really nice. I think it's a natural fit. Our backend is like Node.js. So basically, we write our entire infrastructure from the beginning, right? The backend is Node.js, the front end is React, the mobile app is React Native. So it takes about like a year for us. It's like to like finish the iOS part and then like having an initial version of the Android part. I think around like 2018. I think that's the time that like we launched the cross platform. I can tell you that given all this excitement, the first day we get into the office around like 5 a.m. San Francisco time and then launch it. At that time, there wasn't not that much of traffic. Yeah, I think at most it's like about like 50 people using it at the same time. But the word of mouth is like the media. We have the TechCrunch article with all the stuff. We suddenly see the spike around 3 p.m. at that time, and then the usage shoot up to like, I think at that time it was 5 or 10,000 people are using at the same time. It was like, oh, that's really cool. Nothing breaks down. Yeah. And then like the moment they start building the app, I think that's what Jose is talking about. Like our another part of the infrastructure base is like the iOS build server. We need to have a Mac machine. I think that's the bottleneck. But eventually, like, because at that time, we already have the queue in place, it wasn't be a nightmare. We just need to keep adding more machine to process the job in the queue.
So at that point, the queue gets very long, and so there's a very long delay before you get your final build artifacts, but it doesn't immediately just bring the build servers to the ground.
People can request to build the Android app or the iOS app. The Android app, I think we did some amazing trick, which is credit to our engineer. It's like we can build an Android app in 1 minute, right? But for our iOS app, it takes like 30 to 40 minutes. So the iOS queue is really long for the people. And then like, I think at the early day when we have the capability to build iOS app, I think people are just loving it because it's the first time it's like they feel that there's a true local no-code with a lot of customization. They can build our platform. So people, like at the beginning, there's a lot of iOS users coming to our platform.
And how big was the team at that point in 2018? Was it about the same size it is now?
No, we wasn't able to scale as like fast as we wanted to be. I think at that time we have about like 8 people. We have about like 3 to 4 engineers. We have one consultant helping us for the front end. Yeah.
You mentioned you came in the morning, you were watching the user base. There were not too many users at the start, and then some publications went out, and that really ramped up. What other metrics were you monitoring that day to sort of know how things were doing and whether it was a success or whether there were things that you needed to change?
One of the key metrics we are looking for is people like building the app. So basically, we are looking at the user journey from the time they log in, they create a project, they put something, and then they will be able like to preview this thing on their phone. I think that's the key metric we are looking for at that time. So I think that time like we have about like from the people sign in, check out our platform, actually like download our app and trying out on the phone. I think we have about 50%.
Can you talk through that feature a bit? I don't think we've touched on it yet. You're building your app in this drag and drop interface in the browser, and then you have a companion mobile app, right, that they can go onto their phone and very quickly see how those changes would manifest. How does that actually work under the hood?
It's basically a subscription. So we do it on the fly. And whenever you change something on, I mean, if you want to go lower level, think about WebSockets, something that is connected to a WebSocket, and whenever you change something, it's gonna change in all the connected clients, right? So that's the basis. That's the basis of it, because JavaScript is interpreted and it's fast to see the changes. We can do all that through the subscription. So we are not compiling the app as such. So if you were doing this, imagine with Android Studio or something like that, every time that you want to run the app, you click on the play button, it compiles the whole thing, sends it to the app. In our case, we are just modifying the JavaScript, so we can do that. We can do that through a subscription on the fly. As Wayne mentioned earlier, in the app inventor times, we used to do that with Lisp, with Scheme, basically, because so think about a REPL, read about print loop, basically. Mm-hmm. So that's what we are harnessing to do the updates on the fly.
Yeah, I think one of the things is like we also realize at what point like when the user will have the aha moment. I think that's the time that like the people actually make something on our website, even without waiting, they will see it on their phone. The moment like having your app running on your phone, I think it's really powerful. You get the people like having the feeling of it, connecting to the hardware, and then taking a picture. I think that's the aha moment we are looking for. And then at that time, it's like I think we are the kind of the early adopter of this framework, and then like people can see it in real time. And then over the years, we still found that like that kind of feature is really powerful on our platform, and our people are loving it. Yeah, I think, and also like still as of today, I think that's one of the big differentiator from Thunkable to another competitor out there. There's not a lot of competitor out there has this kind of feature. I think as Jose say, like that's the capability, that's the functionality, that's like years of research we have been placing on it. I think that's the big advantage of using the Thunkable platform. You can like feel it and touch it in your phone right away.
Let's shift gears to modern day and the platform as it exists in its current form, and talk through on the current architecture and DevOps around the systems as they stand today.
Our stack is mostly JavaScript, and we have React on the front end. We have React Native for the apps. We have Node on the back end. We use Spreads. We use Fastify for some of the services, and we use GraphQL for most of the system. And in terms of operations, we use Terraform for provisioning, and then most things, as we mentioned earlier, is a bit of a hybrid, but most things get deployed onto a cluster on GCP, Google Kubernetes Engine, I believe it's called. And then we have the build farm for iOS. That is, we use a provider called Mac Stadium. We run our build servers in there. So everything else is just on GCP, including the Android build server as well. And then for testing, we use from Jest to Detox. Detox is a tool for the mobile apps themselves, a testing framework, and Cypress for end-to-end tests. And we use, for monitoring and logging, we use the stuff that comes out of the box from GCP, like, Stackdriver and cloud monitoring and that stuff. And we also use PM2 dashboards, so the paid subscription to PM2. And that GCP is a lot lower level CPU loads and disk loads and that sort of thing. With PM2, we get a bit higher level information like errors in the app, logging from the apps themselves, that sort of thing. And then in terms of deployment, we use Cloud Build, also from GCP. We have started using GitHub Actions a little bit to separate our core services from building the apps, but most of the pipeline is still Cloud Build, and we use a series of tags to do the deployments. So depending on how you tag the current branch, it will go to development, to staging, to production, or we also have demo sites. If we are working on something, we want feedback from somebody else, we also have those demo sites. And that's pretty much it. As I mentioned at the beginning, we rely on some external services like Atlas or Redis, so we don't have to worry about them. We can focus on building the product and not so much on the operational side of things, because with 5 people it's sort of that you have to do, right? You either do one thing or the other. Probably more important to build the product than to have Mongo up and running reliably.
Yeah, I think I just want to make 2 comments on it. The first point is Jose mentioned about we don't have to deal with it, but I think we need to learn how to work with Mongo alias on Redis, because there is a managed service. So we need to figure out how can we like work better with them. But I think I want to highlight another point, which is quite different than whatever the MVP we are using. I think we are using an open source package called Fastlink. Basically, it's like they do a lot of heavy lifting. It's like building the iOS app, like submit it to Apple, and then we will use basically a lot of like our iOS infrastructure is built on top of it. One of the benefit of using that is we enable our user. They don't need to have a Mac machine or iPhone. They can come to our platform and submit it to Apple. So that like provide a lot of opportunity. They already have an Android phone. They want to do cross-platform. They want to like get reach to more iOS user. That's one of the sweet spot we provide to our user. No MacBook required, no iPhone required. You still can submit it to App Store.
Can you dive into the Apple build farm, the Mac Stadium piece a little bit? Because presumably you have this clustering that's handled by Kubernetes for most of your services, and so that makes deployment of those easier. How have you handled dealing with this farm of multiple macOS devices living in that remote server farm?
Mostly the answer is badly. We deal with them very, very badly. So it's still, it is a little bit like, going back to more of a manual process. We connect to the VPN, we have a script, we have it automated, but sort of manually automated. Okay. And actually Mac Stadium, they have added support for Kubernetes. I don't know if it's recent for us. So hopefully in the near future, we will be able to automate it a little bit more. But at the moment is very much old school bash scripts, run it, it might fail, run it again, that sort of thing. Apple, things with Apple are always complicated. So you might submit the app, they might reject it. You might have to wait 2 weeks for rejection to come in. Times they go on holidays, they go on vacation for 2 weeks, you don't get a review. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, definitely happen. I think inside of our engineering team, we always like look for the best experience for our user. I can tell you, like in the early day, we thought about improving. Besides us like having this individual box machine, we want to have the virtualized environment, right? We want to have like virtualized MacOS. It's like having a one big machine. You can create VM around of it. From our experience, it's like the experience is not that good. If you're having like Xcode running on your machine, that eats up a lot of system resource, CPU and memory stuff. When you virtualize the machine, having like 10 machines running on parallel, it's actually really slow. So from our experiences running all these Mac machines, we find out like the best experience, the fastest speed for our user is actually having all these individual isolated machine. So like whenever like people hit something on top of it, like we can just like process it. Within like 20 minutes, we have the IPA. So running on a virtualized environment, we ease our deployment process. You can just build one machine, you can just make a clone and then deploy. But like the process is like the speed and also the reliability is not as good as the individual Mac machine. That's why we still, as today, we still keep the individual Mac machine. But as Jose said, we always want to improve our experience, improve our developer experience in-house. So we are looking at like the Kubernetes for Mac machine.
Yeah, interesting. I actually hadn't heard of Mac-based Kubernetes before. I'll have to look into that after this. Jose, earlier you mentioned the setup with tagging different branches to deploy maybe development or staging or production. Is the isolation there separate Kubernetes clusters? Are they in separate GCP projects? How does the split look like between those different environments?
I believe we have just the one GCP project. We do have two different clusters. We have a cluster for development, which hosts test, staging, and all the demo sites. And then we have one cluster dedicated to production, basically two different clusters at the moment.
Wei, earlier you hinted at the fact that the node autoscaling was a bit slow in terms of what you would have liked to see. Have you started to address that at all? How does that impact your users?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff is involved in the build farm on our Android build and iOS build. After that, we quickly implement a strategy like is using a queue. Whatever like people sending it, it will be in a queue. Some people, if we are paying subscribe user, they will be in front of the queue. We just keep monitoring the queue. I think we have some like error. Basically, if the queue is queued up for like more than certain, we send us a ping message. If there's continue that thing, and then we need to figure it out like how to like increase the whatever the number of the machine in the build farm. I think it has been working so far really good for us. And also it's like I think it's one lesson for maybe for us. If you make the queue too large, people will just keep hammering it. Like if they make one change, they want to build it. But I think it's really what they're really looking for is they should use the companion app on the phone to see the effect. They're not necessarily like building it. So I think as we improve our system, we also basically like teaching our user what's the best practice on building the app and how are you going to test it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point around what seems like an infrastructure challenge of the queues getting really long. We need to increase our build capacity. But what you just hinted at is that you could probably address it with a UX change to help inform the user on a better development pattern, right? So that they are not sending as many builds. So that's a really interesting concept around things don't always need to be solved at the infrastructure level. You can oftentimes address them much closer to the user and in a much less expensive way by changing the UX of the platform itself.
Yeah, and then the lesson we learn is like we can always just double our size, but I think it's like for us it's like you can always double, but there's always a limit. But how can we like educate our user the best practice while saving money? I think that's really the sweet spot we want to get in.
Are there any major lessons learned related to DevOps and infrastructure that you have gained over the past years building out this platform that you would share with audience members?
So we mentioned earlier, we're a rather small team. We've been focusing on the product as much as possible. We've been relying on all these external services, but the last year we've seen a lot of growth, and it's gotten to a point that we actually have to start specializing a little bit. For instance, 2 months ago, we had a bunch of issues with Mongo, even though Mongo is hosted and is a service and we don't have to worry about it. Then we actually had to worry about it, and we had to dig a lot deeper into how we are writing data, how much data we are writing, how, in terms of frequency, in terms of volume, and stuff like that. For the first couple of years, it was great to be really, really focused on the product and leverage all these services. But as we grow, we are seeing a need of specializing, especially with backend stuff like optimizing queries, making sure that you're using your secondaries in Mongo, or that you're not just hammering on the operations log all day long and then one of your nodes goes offline for half an hour and it can never recover again, that sort of thing. It was great to rely on all these services, but we are at a point in which we actually need to start looking into things a lot closer.
That's good advice, and sort of it's incredibly important early on in a startup to just keep iterating on that product, right? If you don't have users, then none of the infrastructure matters. But it sounds like you're reaching that point where the user curve is going up, and now you got to start, it starts to stretch the systems that you have in place. Wei, does anything stand out for you in terms of lessons learned on building software systems like this?
I have two lessons I learned through this journey. I think the number one is when I look back, I think we heavily rely on the open source projects. When we started, basically we are cloning out of the MIT App Inventor open source projects. I think on our way, we are using like React Native, and also all this wonderful infrastructure out there. I think like we just feel like we just owe them a huge amount of credit. As we like continue expanding in the company, we are looking for ways to like contribute back to the community. We are like benefit from it. I think the second part of it is even at the day one, we need to start thinking about DevOps. I think that's the area like people underinvest in it. But I think is if you don't like have the right infrastructure in place, if you don't have the right database in place at the early day, I think it will bite you eventually at some day at some point. So I think the earlier you invest in DevOps, earlier you invest in like CDCI and all the stuff, I think it will benefit you for the long run, even you don't see it like today.
I think that's good advice. And is there anything on the roadmap for the next 6 months or year at Thunkable related to some of this infrastructure that you could share with us?
I suppose number one action is to actually hire at DevOps. We are hiring. We are interviewing at the moment. We want to do, I mentioned this earlier, we are sort of separating our main cloud build for the core system and the services and trying to use GitHub Actions for the apps themselves. And the main reason being that on GitHub Actions, we can actually do those builds on Mac machines. You can use a Mac. So
with a self-hosted runner,
we use a self-hosted runner because Mac minutes are super expensive. So one Mac minute is 10 Linux minutes. You get to your monthly allowance in like 3 days of builds or something. So we are using self-hosted runners, but that allows us to not only build iOS artifacts, but we can also, I mentioned Detox earlier. Detox basically compiles your app, instruments your app. You get an instrumented version of your app, and you can run tests directly on the iOS emulator and also the Android emulator. And it is almost impossible. I mean, we've tried to run Android emulators on Ubuntu machines, but the Ubuntu machines on GitHub Actions don't have hardware acceleration. So it takes like 6 minutes to bring up the emulator, and then once your emulator is up, your tests have timed out already. With the Mac machines, it works. It works really, really fast and really, really nicely and easy. We want to do more architectural changes. We want to extract more services from the core, and even though it's not DevOps as such, as we started the session saying that DevOps is just everything. So yeah, it's everything. So we count it as that as well. So we want to keep growing so we can keep up with the growth on the platform.
I think that gives a great overview of what Thunkable is and some of the software systems that run behind the scenes and the DevOps that helps empower the team. Any final thoughts from either of you before we close out?
Thunkable is on a mission to like empower everyone to build app without writing a single line of code. We start with Android and iOS. We are getting into the web too. So it's truly like a cross-platform. You have Android and iOS. You write once, you can just export like free project for you. I think we are just getting started. Hopefully like we learn something from the audience. If you like want to join us, like we are hiring for people. We're looking forward to hear from you.
Awesome. And if people want to find out more, where do they go? Just thunkable.com?
Yes.
Perfect. Hey, thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks. Thank you, Sid. Bye.
Thanks for having us.